June 9, 1944. Normandy, France. A dying German officer, a map in his pocket that could save thousands of American lives, and one American medic forced to make an impossible choice. Save your enemy, or let him die. What would you do? This is the story of Robert Hayes, the medic who faced the hardest decision of World War II, a decision that haunted him for the rest of his life. Let me tell you what happened in that bombed-out farmhouse 3 days after D-Day. Picture yourself as a 22-year-old medic. You've been awake for 60 hours straight. Your uniform is covered in other people's blood. You've watched boys your age die in your arms. And you're 3 days into the biggest invasion in human history. That was Robert Hayes. June 9, 1944. 3 days after D-Day. The beaches were secured, but the fighting inland was brutal. Every hedgerow hid German machine gun nests. Every field was a potential minefield. Every farmhouse could be a trap. Robert's unit, the 29th Infantry Division, was pushing through the French countryside toward the town of Saint-Lô. Progress was measured in meters, not miles, and casualties were mounting. Robert was exhausted. But medics don't get to rest, not when men are dying. That morning started like every other morning since D-Day. Artillery fire in the distance. Small arms fire closer. The smell of smoke and cordite, and the cries of wounded men. Medic. Medic. That call never stopped. Day or night. Robert would hear it in his sleep for decades after the war. He grabbed his aid bag and ran toward the sound. Through a hedgerow, across a muddy field, past a burning half-track. He found Private Miller behind a stone wall. Shrapnel wound to the leg. Bad, but survivable. Robert worked fast. Tourniquet, morphine, bandage, tag, move. That's how it went. Hour after hour, wound after wound. Some men he could save, some he couldn't, and every decision had to be made in seconds. By late afternoon, his unit had taken a small village, or what was left of it. German forces had retreated, but they'd left plenty of surprises. Booby traps, snipers, delayed action bombs. Robert's captain ordered him to check a farmhouse on the edge of the village, reports of possible wounded inside. Robert didn't question it. That was his job. Find the wounded. Save who you can. He approached the farmhouse carefully. Front door was blown off its hinges. Windows shattered. Roof partially collapsed. The kind of place that could have a sniper hiding in it, or a booby trap waiting. But he heard something. A voice. Weak. Speaking German. Someone was alive in there. Robert froze at the doorway. Every instinct told him to call for backup, but the voice was getting weaker. Whoever was in there was dying. He made a choice. He went in alone. But what Robert found inside that farmhouse would change everything, not just for him, for thousands of soldiers who would never know his name. The interior was a mess. Furniture overturned, debris everywhere. Shell damage had collapsed part of the second floor into the first, and in the corner, slumped against the wall, was a German officer. He was maybe 30 years old, major's insignia on his collar, blonde hair, blue eyes, blood soaking through his uniform from a massive chest wound. He was dying. Robert could see that immediately. Sucking chest wound. Probably punctured lung. Maybe worse. Without immediate surgery, the man had maybe an hour, maybe less. The German officer's eyes locked onto Robert. He said something in German. Robert didn't understand the words, but he understood the tone. Help me. This was the moment. The choice that would define Robert's war, maybe his life. The German was the enemy. The same army that had killed Robert's friends, that had occupied France, that had started this whole damn war. But he was also a man. Bleeding, dying, asking for help. Robert had taken an oath. The Hippocratic Oath. First, do no harm. Save lives. But he'd also taken an oath to his country. To defeat the enemy, to win the war. What do you do when those oaths conflict? Robert knelt beside the German officer. His training took over. Check the wound. Assess the damage. Determine if treatment is possible. The wound was bad. Very bad. Without a field hospital and surgery, this man wasn't going to make it. But Robert could try. He could stabilize him. Buy him time. Maybe long enough to get him to medical care. Or he could do nothing. Let nature take its course. The German would die in an hour anyway. Nobody would blame Robert. Nobody would even know he'd been here. The German officer spoke again, this time in broken English. Bitte, please, and that's when Robert noticed it. The German's jacket was partially open, and inside, visible in the torn lining, was a folded map. Not just any map. Robert could see the markings, military symbols, troop positions, defensive lines. This wasn't just a dying German officer. This was a German officer carrying intelligence. Robert, quote, Ent's hand moved toward the map, but the German officer's eyes followed. He knew what Robert had seen, and in that moment, both men understood. This wasn't just about saving a life anymore. This was about winning the war. Here's what nobody tells you about war. The impossible choices aren't always between good and evil. Sometimes they're between two kinds of good or two kinds of wrong, and you have to choose anyway. Robert sat back on his heels, his mind racing. Option 1. Save the German officer. Give him first aid. Try to stabilize him. Honor his oath as a medic. Be the better man. Show that Americans have honor even in war. But if he saves the officer, he might not get the map. The German might resist, might fight, might destroy it. And that map could contain information that would save American lives, hundreds of them. Maybe thousands. Option 2. Take the map first. Let the German die. Get the intelligence to command, potentially save American soldiers, win battles, end the war faster. But that means watching a man die when he could have been saved, violating his oath, living with that choice for the rest of his life. Option 3. Try to do both. Save the officer and take the map, but the German might resist, and taking the map by force from a dying man, is that really better than letting him die? Robert looked into the German officer's eyes, and he saw something he didn't expect. Fear. Not anger. Not hatred. Just fear. The same fear Robert had seen in the eyes of dying American soldiers. The German officer spoke again, slower this time, trying to make Robert understand. Mein Bruder, brother. He was pointing at something. Robert followed his gaze. There was a photograph, partially visible in the German's other pocket. A family photo. The officer. A woman, 2 small children. He had a family. A wife. Kids. Just like Private Miller, who Robert had saved an hour ago. Just like Sergeant Davis, who Robert couldn't save on D-Day. Just like Robert's own brother, who was somewhere in the Pacific fighting the Japanese. The German officer wasn't just the enemy. He was someone's husband, someone's father, someone's son, and he was dying. Robert made his decision. He started working, opened his aid bag, pulled out bandages, sulfa powder, morphine. The German officer's eyes widened. Surprise, relief, gratitude. Robert cut away the uniform. Examined the wound. It was worse than he thought. The shell fragment had entered under the ribs, probably hit the lung. Maybe the heart. There was internal bleeding for sure. This man needed a surgeon, fast, but Robert could at least stop the external bleeding, make him more comfortable, give him a chance. He packed the wound, applied pressure, gave morphine for the pain. The German officer's breathing eased slightly. His eyes closed. The morphine was taking effect. And that's when Robert reached for the map. His hand shook as he pulled it from the German's jacket. The officer didn't resist. Maybe he was too weak. Maybe the morphine had dulled his awareness. Or maybe he understood. Robert unfolded the map. What Robert saw on that map made his blood run cold. Because this wasn't just troop positions. This was something much bigger. The map showed German defensive positions for the entire sector. Minefields, artillery placements, machine gun nests, panzer divisions, everything. But more than that, there were annotations in German, but Robert could make out enough: attack plans, counteroffensive routes, timing. The Germans were planning a major counterattack. In 48 hours, they were going to hit the American lines with everything they had, try to push the invasion back into the sea. If this map was accurate, and if American command didn't know about it, thousands of American soldiers would walk into an ambush. But if Robert got this map to command, they could prepare, reinforce the lines, call in air support, maybe even preempt the attack. This map could change the entire course of the Normandy campaign. Robert looked at the dying German officer, the man who'd been carrying this map, the man who, if he'd gotten this information back to his command, might have helped Germany win this battle. And Robert had just saved his life. Had he made the right choice? The German officer's eyes opened. He looked at Robert, at the map in Robert's hands, and he said something that Robert would never forget. Good? He was glad Robert had taken it. Robert didn't have time to process what the German had just said, because he heard voices outside. American voices. His unit was clearing the rest of the village. In about 30 seconds, soldiers would enter this farmhouse, and they would see Robert treating a German officer. Some soldiers would understand, some wouldn't, and some would see the Germans, see the map, and make their own decision about what needed to happen. Robert made a split-second choice. He shoved the map into his aid bag, underneath bandages and medical supplies. Then he stood up and walked to the door. His platoon sergeant, Sergeant Morrison, was approaching with 2 other soldiers. Hayes, you okay? We heard movement in there. Robert stepped outside, closed the door most of the way behind him, blocked the view. I'm fine, Sergeant. Building's clear. No wounded. That was a lie. Robert had never lied to a superior officer before. Sergeant Morrison looked at him. At the closed door, you sure? I thought I heard voices. Just checking. Making sure nobody was trapped under debris. Morrison nodded. All right, we're moving out in 10 minutes. Captain wants to push another click before dark. You good to go? Yes, Sergeant. Morrison and the soldiers moved on. Checking the next building, Robert waited until they were gone. Then he went back inside. The German officer was weaker. The morphine was helping with pain, but the internal bleeding continued. He didn't have long. Robert knelt beside him again, and he asked a question he'd been taught never to ask. Why did you say good when I took the map? The German officer's English was broken, but understandable. War is over. For me. Map makes it end faster. For everyone. You wanted me to take it? Ja. Yes. I have kinder children. I want them to see me again. If I must die, let it end the war. Let me go home. Robert understood then. This German officer wasn't a fanatic. He wasn't fighting for Hitler's ideology. He was just a soldier, like Robert, doing his duty, trying to survive, wanting to go home. And he'd rather die helping end the war than die having prolonged it. I can't get you to a hospital, Robert said quietly. You're behind American lines now. You'll be taken prisoner, but you'll get medical care. You might survive. The German officer shook his head weakly. 9. I know, is okay. I made my choice. You made yours. We are both trying to be good men in a bad war. Those words hit Robert harder than any bullet. He gave the German another dose of morphine, made him as comfortable as possible, and then he did something he'd never done before. He held the enemy's hand. They sat there in silence for a few minutes. A German officer and an American medic, enemies by circumstance, human beings by choice. Then Robert heard the whistle. His unit was moving out. He had to go. I'll send someone back for you, Robert promised. Medical personnel, they'll take care of you. The German officer nodded slightly. Danke. Thank you for being a medic, not just a soldier. Robert stood up, grabbed his aid bag. The map was still inside. He took one last look at the German officer. Then he walked out of the farmhouse. But as Robert rejoined his unit, one thought kept echoing in his mind. What if that German officer dies before help arrives? Will Robert have honored his oath as a medic, or violated it by leaving him there? And the answer would haunt him for years. Robert caught up with his unit. They were moving through another hedgerow, heading toward the next objective. Nobody questioned where he'd been. Medics moved independently. It was expected. But Robert's mind wasn't on the advance. It was on the map in his bag, and the German officer he'd left behind. He had to get the map to command. But to do that, he'd have to explain how he got it, which meant admitting he'd treated an enemy soldier, let him live, left him there. Some officers would understand, some wouldn't. And if the intelligence on the map turned out to be wrong, or outdated, or a trap, Robert would have to answer for that decision. By nightfall, his unit had dug in at a new defensive position. Artillery fire had quieted down. Time to rest, eat, check equipment. Robert approached his lieutenant, Lieutenant Bradford, a good officer. Fair, smart, but also by the book. Lieutenant, I need to report something. Bradford looked up from his map. What is it, Hayes? I found something today, sir. Intelligence. German intelligence. Now he had Bradford's full attention. Show me. Robert pulled out the map, laid it on the hood of a jeep. Bradford studied it closely. His expression changed from curiosity to alarm. Where did you get this? Robert hesitated, then decided on honesty. From a German officer wounded, in that farmhouse in the village. You captured him? No, sir. He was dying. I stabilized him. Then I found the map. Bradford's jaw tightened. You gave medical aid to an enemy combatant? Yes, sir. I'm a medic. It's my duty. Your duty is to American soldiers, Hayes. My duty is to save lives, sir. That's what medics do. Bradford stared at him for a long moment. Robert couldn't read his expression. Anger, disapproval, or maybe respect. Finally, Bradford spoke. This map, if it's legitimate, it's critical intelligence. This shows a major German counteroffensive planned for June 11th. That's 48 hours from now. Yes, sir. This needs to go up the chain immediately. I'll get it to the captain. He'll send it to regiment. They'll send it to division. Bradford paused. As for what you did, treating that German, I'm going to pretend I didn't hear that part. Officially, you found this map on a dead officer. Understood? Robert nodded. Understood, sir. Good. Now get some rest. We move again at dawn. Robert walked away. He'd done the right thing. The map was in the right hands. Intelligence would analyze it. Plans would be made. American lives would be saved. But he couldn't shake the image of that German officer, dying alone in that farmhouse. Had anyone gone back for him? Had he received medical care? Or had he died there, alone, in an enemy's uniform on foreign soil? Robert would never know that night. Robert couldn't sleep. Not because of the artillery fire in the distance, but because of one question: if he had to make that choice again, would he make the same decision? June 11th, 1944. 2 days after Robert found the map, the German counteroffensive came exactly as predicted. At 4:30 a.m., German artillery opened up all along the American lines, massive barrage, shells screaming through the darkness, the ground shaking. But this time, the Americans were ready. Based on the intelligence from Robert's map, the entire 29th Infantry Division had repositioned during the night. Reinforcements had been brought up. Artillery had pre-registered targets. Air support was on standby. When the German armor rolled forward, they hit prepared defenses. American artillery tore into the German formations. P-47 Thunderbolts screamed out of the sky, rockets and bombs obliterating tanks. The counteroffensive that should have pushed the Americans back to the beaches instead broke against prepared defenses. By noon, the German attack had stalled. By evening, it had collapsed. Hundreds, maybe thousands of American lives were saved because the Americans knew it was coming. All because of a map found in a dying German officer's pocket, Robert was in an aid station when news of the victory came through. He was treating wounded from the battle. Americans mostly, but also a few German prisoners. One of the wounded Germans was brought in on a stretcher. Chest wound, critical condition. The battalion surgeon was busy with American casualties. The German would have to wait. Robert looked at the German soldier, saw the wound, knew he was dying, and he made the same choice he'd made 2 days ago. He started treating the German. Another medic, Corporal Jackson, saw him. "Hayes, what are you doing?" Doc said, "Americans first. This man's dying, Jackson. He's the enemy. He's a soldier, like us. He didn't start this war. He's just fighting in it. You can't save everyone, Hayes." "No, but I can try." Robert worked fast, stopped the bleeding, gave morphine, stabilized the German enough to survive until the surgeon could operate. The German soldier looked up at Robert with the same expression Robert had seen 2 days ago. Fear, gratitude, recognition of shared humanity. "Danke," the German whispered. The battle was over. The counteroffensive had been crushed. The Normandy beachhead was secure. A week later, Robert's lieutenant called him over. "Hayes, I thought you'd want to know. That map you found. Intelligence confirmed it was genuine. Probably saved hundreds of lives. Maybe more." "That's good, sir. There's more. Regiment wants to commend you. Maybe put you in for a medal." Robert shook his head. "No, sir. I don't want a medal." "Why not? You did something extraordinary." "I was just doing my job, sir. Helping wounded soldiers." Bradford studied him for a moment. "That German officer, the one you found the map on. Did you ever wonder what happened to him?" Robert had wondered. Every day. "I assume he died, sir." "No, he didn't. French resistance found him in that farmhouse, barely alive. They got him to an American field hospital. Thought he was one of ours at first because of all the American bandages on him." Robert's heart stopped. "He survived? He's in a POW camp now. Recovering, he'll probably make it home after the war." Robert didn't know what to say. Bradford continued. "He told the doctors an American medic saved his life, left him with enough treatment to survive, until help came. The doctors asked around. Nobody admitted to it, but I know it was you. Sir, you don't have to explain. I understand what you did, and I think it took more courage than anything else I've seen in this war." "How do you figure, sir?" "Because you chose to be human in a place designed to make us into killers. That's harder than killing. That's the hardest thing there is." Robert felt something break inside him. Not in a bad way, in a healing way. He'd made the right choice. The war in Europe ended on May 8, 1945. Robert Hayes came home 3 months later. He didn't talk about the war much. Like most veterans, he kept the hard parts to himself. But he became a doctor, worked in a hospital, saved lives, lots of them. In 1963, 18 years after the war, Robert received a letter. It was from Germany. The letter was in English. Careful English, translated by someone who wanted to get it right. "Dear Dr. Hayes, you do not know me, but I know you. Or at least, I know what you did. My name is Klaus Richter. I was a major in the German army. On June 9, 1944, I was wounded in a farmhouse in France. I should have died that day. But an American medic saved my life. He gave me first aid, he gave me morphine, and he left me with enough care to survive until help came. I never learned his name, but I learned he took a map from my pocket. A map that helped the Americans stop our counteroffensive. A map that probably helped end the war. For years, I wondered about that medic. Who was he? Why did he save me? Why didn't he just let me die and take the map? I finally found the answer. Through the Red Cross, through inquiries, through research. The medic's name was Robert Hayes, and this is his address. I am writing to say thank you. Thank you for showing mercy. Thank you for being a doctor first and a soldier second. Thank you for letting me live to see my children grow up. I have thought about you often over the years. about the choice you made, about the kind of man who makes that choice. I hope you know you were right. You did the right thing, and I will never forget it. With deepest gratitude, Klaus Richter. Robert read the letter 3 times, tears running down his face. All these years he'd wondered if he'd made the right choice, wondered if saving the enemy was a betrayal of his brothers in arms, wondered if his oath as a medic mattered more than his duty as a soldier. Now he knew. He'd made the right choice. This is the story of Robert Hayes, the medic who saved his enemy, but it's more than that. It's a story about what it means to be human in the most inhuman circumstances. War forces us to see people as enemies, as targets, as obstacles. But medicine reminds us, they're all just people, bleeding, hurting, dying. Robert Hayes chose to see the person, not the uniform. And that choice saved a life, changed a war, and reminded us all that even in the darkest moments, we can still choose to be human. That's the real victory. Not the battles won, but the humanity preserved.